You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, the Next Generation intro cast. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
Each week, James and I will be guiding Alex through the exciting world of Season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's a voyage of discovery, one where we find out as much about ourselves as we do the show. This week, we are talking about Justice. It was written by Ralph Willis and Worley Thorne, directed by James L. Conway, and it aired the week of November 9th, 1987. Hey James, what's the synopsis?
After a tough mission setting up a colony, the crew are all hoping to get some shore leave. Luckily, they encounter a planet full of hippie porn stars, and it seems like a great place to hang out for a while. After pretending to investigate the laws of the planet, a scout party goes to experience some good times, taking Wesley with them. While the grown-ups go and do grown-up things, a girl really wants to see Wesley do something with a ball, but Wesley breaks a law by touching some plants and is sentenced to death. On the Enterprise, the crew investigate a satellite which is acting as the planet's protector. Everyone talks about the Prime Directive for a while, and then they all leave.
Yeah, so I thought it was really great that they did some location filming on this episode. What did you think of that?
I thought it looked like they'd gone to Centre Parks.
I was going to go with Epcot, but yes, the point stands. That's exactly what it looks like.
Actually, Epcot, yeah, no, that's a fair comparison, yes. I mean, we talked about Lonely Among Us being quite dull and boring. This is also sort of dull and boring, although not in the same way. This is just so awful. It's hard to concentrate on the plot rather than the ongoing terribleness on the screen. And nipples. Those nipples are incredibly distracting.
We have talked a bit about costumes in the past. What were they thinking with this? They seem to be wearing toilet paper, basically.
I'm also, while we're doing this, I'm sort of dipping into the original series. And it just so happened that just before watching this, I was watching from Series 1 of the original series, What a Little Girl's Made Of. It's a very similar costume in that as in this. But that was the 60s. And this isn't. And this looks terrible. I mean, just what made them think that this was a good idea? I genuinely cannot fathom it.
Well, this is a revised version. John D.F. Black, he was the writer of the original script, and he took his name off it. It was originally about terrorists and a planet full of them where there were punishment zones designed to fight anarchy. It moved quite far away from that original plot.
Yes, it became about nymphomaniacs.
Do you know what this reminded me of?
Logan's Run?
Barbarella. Love.
Love.
From the moment Tasha Yar comes onto the bridge with her report on the planet, and you know, she's really not been doing her homework this week. Well, I looked up their laws, but not their punishments. Well, maybe that's quite an important part of any justice system there, Tasha. Maybe you're not really ready to be head of security. But never mind that. She says they make love at the drop of a hat. At the drop of any hat.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty aroused at the sight of a dropping hat. The line, any hat. As if Well, I'll make love at the drop of a trilby, but a baseball cap is out of the question. I've got standards. I have to say, though, that was bizarre, and especially when you've set up a character for several episodes with this childhood of rape as a backstory, which, as we've discussed before, is a little uncomfortable. She's quite desperate to get down to the planet of the nymphomaniacs, isn't she? Not as keen, though, as Riker. Riker is very keen from the start. I think we should go. I think we should. I really think we need to get down there. And I'm just going to sit down for a while. And when they get there, he seems to spend a good half of the episode, at least, walking around while people are getting it on, looking at them and going, that's nice. They're in. No, you carry on.
Well, my favourite line of the episode was, they are fit.
Oh, God, I forgot. They're not doing much to dissuade that thing that we had in the previous week about Riker being a sex pest, basically. If they weren't open about it, he'd be in a bush. But they're quite open about it, so he can just stand around while people are being oiled and watch them.
I mean, there was literally, actually, a shot of someone being oiled up.
Yes, the oiling of the arse was... Why? Why is that there?
It's just very, very strange. And do you notice when they arrive in the council chamber, they decide on a lot of local laws there. They're always talking about the roads and the street lighting. It seems that one man guides off Yar and Troy for what I can only presume is some kind of orgy.
Well, they're quite open about it when they first turn up, aren't they? About, we can go and take you for this fun where we can get acquainted. But not Wesley. No. You can go away. But the adults come to us. And it's quite obvious what it is, because there's only two things that you see people... Well, there's three things. Sentencing people to death, shagging, and playing what seems to be a version of rock, paper, scissors with dice.
Riker, having gone ahead in the scout party coming back, he seems fine taking the adolescent boy down to the planet of the nymphomaniacs. Would nobody else question that decision at all?
It's an odd decision, and it's there for an interesting part of the script, and it's not interesting. It's just uncomfortable watching Will Wheaton being given these lines of, well, there's some games I don't know how to play. I want to play ball. Oh, that I can play. Oh, God.
I know he's not an ordinary teenager, but...
Ordinary teenagers don't wear that kind of knitwear.
He must have been hot on that planet, because that girl basically only had, about, I don't know, I would say about 16 sheets of toilet paper on.
And can I say how uncomfortable it was watching young guys and girls, but especially what the young girl was dressed in, which was not a lot, and then being made to run around. That was uncomfortable in the extreme. I felt like Operation U-Tree were about to burst through the door at any moment.
All in high definition. So Wesley goes to play ball, and he gets arrested for touching Bush.
Yeah. Of all the things that you could pick... I mean, obviously, it's trying to pick something that's an utterly trivial thing of, and they're going to kill him for this. What they like. But it's just awful.
Is the equivalent of being sentenced to death for walking on the grass. In fact, it's very, very close to that. He tramples on some new flowers.
But he doesn't trample on them so much as take a running dive into them when he's obviously seen that those miniature greenhouses are there. He knows they're there. And it's not even as if he trips on the fence. He takes a dive.
I loved the policemen had exactly the same outfits on, but they had a black belt as well, for all their utilities.
Well, and wasn't it lucky that, the enforcers are only ever in one zone at a time, which is a totally bizarre policy that makes no sense at all, but we'll move on from that. Wasn't it just fortunate, therefore, that they happened to be in that zone and just in that part of the park at that precise moment, almost as if it were just there for plot reasons.
That's very cynical of you to say so, and I think this was a story that arose very naturally from every plot element that's set up. I would show this script to students of television, wannabe scriptwriters, and say, this is how you structure a screenplay.
I struggle to find anything redeeming, basically. And I mean, it's not even as if it's all confined to on the planet, because the stuff in space is equally just... Well, that's not awful. It's just kind of boring, really.
You do get the sense that they are quite low on ideas. It does seem like the next generation in this first season is struggling, because this is basically the second floaty head alien that we've had in about 4 episodes.
It's also another case of a machine with a god complex. Well, that's the first motion picture, and obviously there's episodes of the original series where that comes in. I'll tell you what it is. These few episodes have felt like we are just raiding the original series for ideas, and in the worst possible way.
It might be okay if you were doing something interesting or something new with them, but the execution is incredibly poor.
No, it's like they're making a 60s show in the 80s, and then trying to bring in a bit of politics of the day to it, and utterly failing miserably. Because there's maybe a sort of interesting idea to actually analyse there about, what are the limits of justice and what are the problems of absolute laws and whatnot. But that's totally pushed to the background by Wesley treading on some flowers and people with barely anything on, and you're constantly distracted by all these men's nipples.
There seems to be very little point to me in this god alien, because that might be interesting if they chose to disobey their laws and then they're forced to reevaluate it because of this, but because they are so enlightened, they do respect the laws of the planet anyway and want to find an alternative solution. So it's not like it actually plays any part in the plot other than to give people in the Enterprise something to do.
Yeah, it is precisely that. It's so dull that you get to the end of the episode and it's almost as if they can't be bothered to find a resolution for it. So you get to the end and, can you give us a sign? No. They've buggered off. Oh well, I'd hoped to learn something, as had the audience, but we'll just finish it here.
The point of this episode, I think, is to do with the Prime Directive, which, as soon as they set foot on this planet, they have broken anyway. This is not a warp-capable society, and they're introducing them to all their technology without a second thought.
How do you know they're not a warp-capable culture? We just haven't seen it. Maybe they did have warp at one time, but then they got distracted by each other's bodies being oiled and just forgot about it.
That's probably right. I've not taken that into account.
They had no oil left for the ships after they put it on all their arses.
Well, they don't even know what the Prime Directive is at this point. They just get it completely wrong.
And what is the point of it? In so much as you have a large chunk of the episode with Picard debating, well, I should save Wesley, but it means going against the Prime Directive. And then at the end of the episode it's, well, bugger it, frankly. You can't take him, that's against your directive. Yes it is. Goodbye.
Well, the ending, they've not arrived at any conclusion. Wesley's still under the death penalty. They've not come to any resolution. They've not found some old law. They've not really done any negotiations with the god alien. They've not come to any form of new enlightenment. They just decide, well, let's just do what we were going to do all along. Sorry, we're disrespecting you a little bit there.
They try to sell it on the idea of, oh, we're telling God that he's got some very odd ideas about justice. But that's not the point you've been selling it on. You've had a brief mention about, well, maybe we won't be allowed to leave the planet, but that's a brief mention. Until then, all of the conflict about whether they can go through with it or not is about the Prime Directive. And you get to the end and suddenly that's not an issue anymore, really. It's whether they can get away or not. And it's bizarre to suddenly turn that round and make the slightly more trivial point the main point, and to just ignore the main point, really.
And I'd completely forgotten that this thing in the sky existed. As I remembered the episode, the whole reason they couldn't take Wesley up was because of the Prime Directive. I haven't seen this episode for a while. So when that thing came up, I thought, oh, okay, there's more than one reason. But I mean, in the end, it didn't really matter.
No, the whole thing is incredibly inconsequential. I suppose in some ways it's nice to see Wesley acting like a normal child, playing with other children, as opposed to being a smug know-it-all.
He's just a smug child playing with other children, though. Being awkward about the fact of he doesn't know certain games. He'd really like to know those games, but not in front of Riker.
On this point, there's been quite a lot of sexuality in Star Trek The Next Generation so far, and as we've discussed, this is a show, I would say, targeted at 11-year-old boys, really. It does seem quite odd and not really in place. It's quite a sexless environment as it goes on The Next Generation, but I don't really think it should have this amount of blatant sexuality on display.
I agree. It's odd. But this strikes me in the writing very much as an 11-year-old's view of sex, because it's so immature in its the way it deals with it. It's just, look at that! Oh, she's nearly naked. Oh yeah, it's teenage boy stuff. That's what it is.
And what I worry about, and especially in the 80s, was, Dr. Crusher did not scan any of these free-loving aliens for STDs.
I did like Worf saying that the women couldn't handle Klingon mating. That was nice.
So what we're saying is that interspecies sex is a thing, then. I mean, which I guess I know with Spock, but they're at least vaguely sort of humanish. The Klingons seemed a step further, but fair enough.
In later episodes, when you see Klingon females, then and them, and I believe you do see the beginning of Klingon mating, you'll see why maybe he says this.
On that note, that means it's time for our quickfire round.
Quickfire.
Yeah, one thing came to mind when I was watching the episode, which was, well, what's the economy of this planet based on? Because no one does any work. There seems to be the enforcers, of which we're told there's very few, and everyone else is humping. And maybe that's why they're delivering supplies at the start, because clearly there's no industry. Unless what we're not seeing is the massive harvest of rubber plants, because they must get through a fair bit of rubber.
This episode was, in fact, the first to feature location shots since the holodeck and encounter at Farpoint. I had no idea that was actually location. It was filmed at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant in North Los Angeles.
So they all get down onto the planet, and constant guilt-free sex is offered to them on a plate, basically. No one seems particularly reluctant to take it, even if they are to start with, like Councillor Troy. Oh, I don't know about this. After a few strokes of the face, then suddenly, but then again, maybe, yes. It's an intergalactic visit to Amsterdam, basically, but quite a cheap one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in a loving relationship. Nah, whatever.
Why would they even need this? They've got the holodeck.
They've worn out the groinal attachments.
Well, that about rounds it up from us. Another wonderful episode. I hope you enjoy it. If you would like to, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, or come leave a comment on thespoilist.com and click the podcast button. We do hope you'll join us again next time, but for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Please let it improve soon.
If Everyone knows you only use the holodeck for sex.
Having it away with that jailbait ball girl.
That's what Wesley was trying to do.
Kudos. That's the funniest thing that's been in any of these episodes so far.